No, go if it's right. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? That's the most important thing. Welcome. Just need to double check that everyone can hear. Okay. So can you just check in, see if you can hear me, please? Hi there, NC Spider. Can you hear me? No, can you hear me? Yep. Good evening. Yes, good evening. Had some technical issues, as you might have guessed. When isn't there technical issues? Yeah, you can hear me all right. All right, everyone can hear me all right. Lovely. Right. Well, that is great. Well, yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new Sheridan Club and the July the July talk. Your good news for you is I had a little presentation plan, and at the last minute, it's not worked. So we're going to have to go a little off piste. But there we go. It'll be fine. Anyway, let's start with a drink. That's always the most important way to start. Now, hopefully, if I've got the setup right. Oh, and thank you, Veronica, for the mention of my tie. If I've got the setup right, you should be able to see this setup I've got here. So we'll go for the first drink. I hope people have got their ice and their gin and everything ready and raring to go. So first of all, I'm going to grab my gin that I've got here. Add a little bit of that in there. I always do it to eye. I mean, I know some people like things very, very specific, but to me, I always do it to eye, and I think that works quite well. So I'll add this ice in here. I can get it out. There we go. You can see there. That's what I'm doing. Right. And now we'll do the garnish. These have been pre-washed, lemon and lime. We'll get into garnish a little bit more during the talk, but this is just the starting. So just cutting the ends off there, and then I'm gonna cut it in half like that. I've got my one wedge, and then I'm gonna do the same with the lime. I find cutting the little knob bits off at the end seems to work quite well in terms of making it a little bit easier to handle. And I did wash my hands beforehand, so that's always good. Add those to that, and then of course some tonic as well, and we'll go into some more detail about the tonic too. Try and get that. Always the trick when you're doing the gin tonic is to try and not get the tonic to fizz too much before you start drinking it. Because if that fizz goes, then you've lost your effervescence for your drink. And there you go. This is the drink. This is called the Evans Gin and Tonic. It's named after a club member, in fact. Lemon and lime looks visually quite attractive, I think. So cheers, everybody. Great. So that's always the most important thing when we're starting, that we have a drink. And that's the Evans with both the lemon and the lime. So now we'll talk a little bit about some of the brief history of the gin and tonic. Of course, the key ingredient to tonic water is quinine, which is from South America and was used to treat malaria. And it's a bark, it's dried, it's brown, it's exceptionally bitter to taste. But it was very good for treating malaria. And so when it became a little bit more available, because originally it was, worth more than its weight in gold, it was prescribed to people to help them not get malaria. But it had this great bitterness to it. So, I mean, what do you do when you've got this very bitter medicine where you could add sugar to it? That's one of the things that people did. Well, there's citrus juice around, and that's actually quite good, vitamin C, and helps get rid of scurvy and all that kind of thing. So that's great. And then also you can add gin or booze to it, which is fantastic. So I'm going to make another drink now, which is kind of what I see is almost like the original style of a gin and tonic. I'm just going to go and grab something from the fridge, and I shall be right back. So this is my tonic syrup here. It's essentially quinine flavour, and it's quinine and sugar basically. How I've made this is I got a bottle of regular tonic water. Best to not get the diet stuff to make the syrup, and I essentially put it in a saucepan, heated it up, and it gradually reduced over time to about 20% of what it was originally. So this was a litre originally, and this is kind of what it got down to. And it's got a very, you can just about see, it's got a very slight colour to it from the sort of cooking process, as it were. And the reason why I used it this way is because you do sometimes see people make their own tonic syrups with quinine, and there are some commercial ones available, and that's fine, but it's very, very difficult to get the right quantity of quinine when you're making the tonic syrup yourself. I've tried it once or twice. I wouldn't recommend it. Frankly, it's quite a dangerous thing to be doing, so I don't do it anymore. But one of the problems is if you have an overdose of quinine, you get cyanosis. And cyanosis can lead to blindness and eventually can even lead to death. So probably something best to avoid. So also, if you're ever going to like a bar or somewhere like that, and they're making their own tonic syrup, and if it had little particles of little bits of bark, which I have seen floating in it, personally, I would avoid it and just get something from the bottle. Anyway, so here's the drink for the for a more original style. We'll use this tumbler glass here. We'll get some more gin here. I think I'll use something nice and traditional, which would be Tanqueray. So here we go. So I'm just adding that. There we go. There. Oh, you get me the elbow, please. Right, lime as well, very important. So this is about roughly the ratios I would go for is you want twice as much gin as the tonic syrup and the lime juice. That's roughly what we're going for. Of course, I'm doing it by eye, but that's about right. When you're juicing citrus, there's a number of different ways to do it. Some people have the little squeezy ones like that. I quite like this. This is it's called a Mexican elbow. So you put the citrus in, like so. This is one for lemons, but it does lemons and it does limes as well. And if you really squeeze it in, you can actually get the orange in there as well. Add a little bit. We don't want too much. Add a little bit to that, like that. I should give it a little bit of a stir. Now, and we will get onto this, but one of the things that it wouldn't have been so plentiful would have been ice. And so actually, in the case of a drink like this, I would generally suggest just adding some still water to this. So you can add as much as you like. You can kind of have it like there, and it's quite strong, or you can kind of add a little bit more, and it's a bit more of a lengthened sort of sundowner kind of thing. Of course, it's got no effervescence at all, but that was because early on, when people were drinking it in India, various places around the world, it was the quinine that they had. It wasn't tonic water in a bottle, you know, all carbonated and lovely, like we would know today. So also evening to Ali as well, who's turned up. One of the things I was going to do, as I said, a little off kilter with the technical issues, was I'm very up for having questions. So if you've got any questions, type them into the YouTube thing. There will be a prize for the best question of the evening. And also, if you can, if you're having a gin tonic, hope you are having a gin tonic, then do take a picture and put it on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. We are at Summer Fruit Cup. That's my handle on those social platform things. There'll also be a prize for the best picture as well. So there we go. So this is kind of the, as I said, the very early stuff. It's my imagination as to exactly what it would be like. I mean, it's not based on a particular recipe, but kind of looking at how you would try and improve the flavor of something. That's kind of the approach that I have taken. In addition, you can use this tonic syrup with sparkling water to kind of get your own balance of tonic. So if you want to have more of the quinine flavor in your gin and tonic, you can just put a little bit less sparkling water in. And also, if you wanted to, you can do what's called a GT Turbo, which is a combination of gin and tonic syrup and lime. And you put it in a martini and you shake it. And so there's no dilution really other than just when you're shaking it, no water, no tonic. And it's kind of like a compressed gin and tonic. And this was a drink that was served at Pearl Bar maybe 10 years ago. It's quite a famous bar in London, famous for molecular mixology and that sort of thing. But what I found quite interesting was, in many ways, it harked back to this early kind of style of gin and tonic that you'd had back in the day. Was there yes, Krista, I am the same guy that did the martini talk years ago. I have more hair here, less hair here, and I've gained weight. It's age. Still love gin. Still going on, loving gin. James asking about the glass shapes. I have a plethora of glasses here to show you. I will be talking about glasses, don't you worry. Right, now onto gin. Many different types of gin. You've got your very classic London Dries, things like Tanquerays. There's slow gin. There's, as many of you know, be a great increase in flavoured gin recently, like this. Jaffa Cake gin, a gin that tastes like Jaffa Cakes and has Jaffa Cakes in it. There you go. And there's also navy gin as well. And different gins lend themselves differently to gin and tonics, and some work better than others. So, I mean, London Dry, you can use the classic Indian tonic and a whole range of other things. That works very well indeed. For slow gin and fruity gins, you can just use normal tonic, but some people like to use bitter lemon and or slightly dry tonics. Bitter lemon, lemon tonic are essentially the same thing, and bitter lemon is really just normal tonic water with some sort of lime juice or lemon juice added to it. At one time, there was also bitter orange, but that kind of went by the wayside. And in Sweden, I think it is, you can quite often get a grapefruit one, which is a shame we can't really get it here because that's really nice indeed. So navy, and I think there might be a few naval people on, so hello if you are there. Navy gin, Royal Dock from Hayman's. There we go. There you can see it. So for something like this, this is 57% ABV. It's going to be strong. And that's kind of, that's the strength of navy gin. So put a little bit in our glass here. I'm going to use tall glass in this particular occasion. It's just kind of, I'm just going through various different glasses. It's not particularly using one for a particular occasion. Still, some ice in there, plenty of ice, very important there. And then, so for this one, I'm using this, which is Fever Tree's Aromatic tonic. Again, in the cans, I think the cans are great. I think there's less weight when they're being transported. It's easier when you're carrying it home. It's they fit in the fridge better, you know, where people put their eggs. That's where I put my little cans. And personally, I think 150 is right for me. I find the 200 ml bottle, I always have a bit left over, and I don't really care for that at all. So now the reason why I'm particularly using this for this drink is because it's got it's inspired by Angostura bitters, which is this product here, which I'm sure many of you will know. And so it's got some of these sort of herbal, sort of medicinal flavors. It was once thought to be a cure for seasickness. It's the key ingredient, other than gin, in the pink gin. So this is kind of like, some people like a pink gin and tonic, where they make a gin and tonic and they add a few dashes of bitters. They've kind of done the work for you. And of course, with something like this, it's got to be a lime, right? I mean, if it's navel and all that, it's got to be a lime. But also, I think, as I said, so much about drinking is also the visual. And here you can kind of see you've got this pink and then the green, and it just works very nicely. So that's an example of how you can kind of think what gins might go with what kind of flavors. Now moving on to the tonic. So as I said, you've got things like the classic Schweppes kind of Indian tonic, that sort of thing. I know some people are really down on Schweppes. I personally think it's very good. I think it works well, and that's kind of my go-to, partly because when I'm reviewing gins, I need to have something that people have got on hand quite readily. But there are some other variations. As I said, the Aromatic I think is great from Fever Tree, and another real favorite of mine, which we'll come on to a little bit later, is the Fever Tree Mediterranean tonic, which is a little bit more herbal. But you mean, there's most supermarkets, so many more tonic waters available now. I know Schweppes in their heritage range do a cucumber flavored one. There is grapefruit, and there's rosemary, and there's a whole range of different things. And you can kind of take the approach of, well, the gin's got rosemary in it, so I'll put a rosemary with it, or it doesn't. So I like rosemary, so I want to mix it with that. And both are perfectly fine. You might want to accentuate a flavor, you might want to add it, but there's a lot to kind of look at. But each of them can go with slightly different things, if it's more herbal or more floral or things like that. Okay, now, James, are you ready? We're moving on to the glassware. So, glassware, there's a range of many different ones. We've got classic, and actually was something for the people that are watching. If you can kind of tell me a little bit about what glass you like to drink your gin and tonic out of, that would be fantastic, as it's coming up, because I can talk about that as well. So here we have the very classic, this is from the 70s, like very classic tumbler. You could have a cut glass crystal one or some weight to it or something like that. So that's the tumbler. And then the other one, often the two comparisons, at least for a very long time, were these two, the highball or the Collins glass, or the rocks glass or the tumbler. And part of it is down to preference, for sure. One of the things in the various experiments and things that I've done, looking really into like how to make the best kind of gin and tonic, is what I've noticed is, if you want to drink a gin and tonic quickly, so if you're making it and you want to pretty much drink it straight away, tumbler is often a better choice because of how the ice sits in the glass. So the ice kind of floats to the top and it melts more quickly than in a highball, where the ice, as you can see, well, this is melted a bit, but the ice is one on top of another, generally, depending on the size of it. So that makes a bit of a difference as well. And then certainly if you were, for whatever reason, you were having some sort of soiree and you were going to make a big tray of gin and tonics, and they were going to be sitting there for a little bit of time, then the highball would be the better one to go for, because although ultimately they kind of melt at a similar rate, the tumbler melts quickly a lot more, and the highball takes a little bit more time. But there's also, what do you like the feel of in your hand? Do you like the tumbler, or do you like the highball? You've got this is a glass that specifically, it's a little bit dirty actually, but apologies. Specifically designed for the gin and tonic. It was made by Heyman's. You can still get them. It's based on a very old design, but it's a very thin lip there that you can see, and it's this kind of highball. But what's quite nice is because it's a little bit thicker at the bottom when you're holding it, and if you're holding it here and you've got these grooves in here that gives you a bit of grip, it's much easier to hold, and also your hand doesn't get so cold. And also with the thicker bottom, when you're putting it on the table, you're getting less sort of sweating, as you might say, which is when the ice is melting and you're getting all this condensation coming off the glass. But then there's the new kid in town, and the new kid in town is the copper de balloon, or the balloon glass, or the goldfish bowl glass. This is the sort of Spanish style of gin and tonic. This is where this has come from. The Spanish style of gin and tonic originates, funnily enough, from Spain. Goodness. And it's actually, well, from the Basque region, I should say, very technically. Not so, from the Basque region. And originally it was in glasses a little bit more like this sort of large burgundy glass. And they'd be filled with ice because it was something that was popular sort of in kitchens. So it was so hot in there, you needed to have all this ice that would be nice and refreshing. And that's why you tended to get slightly more inventive garnishes and things like that going on, because they had access to all these different plants and herbs, and they also had this culinary background of knowing how to pair flavors and things like that. So that's kind of the gin tonic style. You've got some glasses like some people I know like their gin tonic in quite a small glass. I'm not averse to having a small little gin tonic, and then I have two, but it doesn't get cold so quickly. The advantage of a smaller glass like this is you've got the stem, so your hand doesn't make the body warm, of the glass warm, or make the drink warm, and your hand doesn't get cold, which is the same as with this, but a lot of ice to fill this. It's pretty much a whole ice cube, a whole tray of ice to fill one glass. And then what do you do? So so that's a consideration. You can also, if you really wanted to have something a bit bizarre, you could go for something like this, which is a mason jar on a stem, which I got in Canada from a shop called Army and Navy. And I don't know, possibly the weirdest glass I've seen, but there you go. Absolutely chic. I'm sure you would agree. Let's have a little look at some questions here. There's a good question. The question is, when ordering a gin tonic in a pub bar for two people, do you recommend the preferred measure of gin in each glass and one tonic between you? Well, I think that's a good question. If you can share the tonic, I think that's reasonable enough. I personally my preference would be that I could pour my own tonic. So it's not uncommon if I would order one in a bar, I might have some gin and have a gin tonic, and then just order another gin and then add the tonic to it. But the downside is it's a bit flat. So actually, if you had to, it's a very good idea, and you could do it that way. I personally think that it is dreadful manners to pour someone else's tonic for them. There you go. Was any other questions on the glassware there, James? I'll wait for a sec. I'll just have a little water while I'm waiting.
That gin and tonic etiquette there.
Oh, yes, gin and tonic etiquette is essential. But I mean, you can find whatever. This glass actually, this one that we had the first one from. This is also a little bit like the balloon. It's a sort of half pint beer glass, but this is probably one of my favourite gin and tonic glasses, because you can get a decent amount in there. You get your 50 mils of gin and your 150 tonic and ice and the garnish, and it works very nicely. So I think that's also a nice choice. Whatever you like, really. I think that's the most important thing. However you like to drink your gin and tonic, that's the most important thing. There isn't necessarily a right way or a wrong way to do it. But I think that there are little tips, and this is kind of what we're trying to do today, is just share some little tips that I found in my experience I've found useful, and then maybe that might be useful for you. We have a question of I guess the question is, what tonic would you recommend for an Old Tom? That's an interesting one, because Old Tom is going to be a little bit sweeter, and some tonics can be quite sweet already. So if I was thinking about it, I think because they've got these kind of spice notes in something like this, the Aromatic, I think that could work quite nicely. There are some more kind of herbal ones that could work. A bitter lemon or a citrus might work, but it also might be just too much of a clash. It kind of depends a little bit on the Old Tom. But if you were thinking about something like a bathtub Old Tom, or the Hayman's Old Tom, or even like the Herno, then probably I'd be inclined to something like the Aromatic, or if you want to do something a little bit different, maybe some just sparkling water or soda water, and then maybe just a dash or two of Angostura in there, so you have a drier drink because you've got that sweetness and that boldness in there now. Excellent, James. I'm very glad that you enjoyed that. And also hello to Bernie, who's here. And etiquette is essential. I agree. Now, the ice. So important. So important. One thing, well, we'll come on to it about temperature. Very important as well. But so ice, absolutely essential. And a lot of various different ice that you can get ice around. So you can get crushed ice, which is just very, very fine shards of ice. One of the big pluses of crushed ice is that it melts very quickly, and it is in the process of the melting. Generally, that's the thing that makes a drink cold. So often, if you think about the ice that's in your glass, it's not just the fact that the ice is next to the gin and tonic and that makes it cold. It's more that the ice is warming up because of the heat, the relative warmth of the gin and tonic. And so that's the ice heats up, and then that makes the gin and tonic colder, and that also causes the ice to slightly melt. So actually a little bit of ice melt, if you want a really cold drink, is important. Something else to consider when you're mixing gin and tonic is that any mixing of gin gin or any alcohol with any non-alcoholic substance, so ethanol and water is basically what we're talking about, is an exothermic reaction, which means that it releases heat. And the higher the ABV of your gin, the more heat it will release. So even before you've even started, your gin and tonic is getting hotter, which is outrageous and disgusting and shouldn't be stood for. And that's why you need the ice. So crushed ice, it will make your drink really cold very, very quickly, but it will make it really, really watery. So it's not great. Then we have cubed ice, and I should go and get some to illustrate. So we're quite fortunate that our fridge freezer, although it was something I stipulated when I went to get it, has ice bank at the top, and we've got this tray in here. Now this should not be, and this is very much a case of, you know, me setting a very bad example to people. What I find very useful is when you have an ice cube tray, take all of the ice cubes out and put them in a little bag or in a little pot and put them in the freezer. Don't leave a few gaps, because eventually what happens is you only have 2 or 3 left, and then when you want a drink, you've got nothing left. But these, I think these are particularly good. It's LEQUE is the brand, but I think they do a really good job. They're a nice size. They're roughly 1 inch cubed. So there you go. Vague idea. They don't have any funny little bits on them, because any sort of, I mean, novelty ice cubes can be fun, but anything that's got very small little bits that come off of it, they'll melt much more quickly, which is problematic. So that is the ice cubes, and then we'll go to the Icebergs, which will be next. They're just going to come over. So won't be a sec. I'll see. Too many icebergs in the freezer. Well, it is absolutely overflowing. So here we go. Icebergs. So these are essentially just very, very large pieces of ice, like this. And what I tend to do is I freeze them in a Jacob's cracker box. There you go. Thank you very much. And about half fill it with water, and then I tip it out, and then I use I've got a little tool like this which I use. There you go, just to chip away at it. But if you don't have one of those, you can always use this if you happen to have one, or you can find one, which is a Parmesan knife. So that can also work. And then the other one was ice balls, which come in these sort of bowls that look a little bit like this. No giggling, everybody. I know. And you fill them up, and then you get these nice large balls of ice. The plus with that is that they last a long time. They're not going to melt, and you just have one nice big one in the drink. You could put petals or citrus peel or wedges of citrus and all sorts of different things inside the ice ball. So that can also add color and eventually add flavor and that to your drink. So they also work quite well. But one of the problems is you've got to fill this fiddly thing up and put it in there. You're never going to have a huge amount of them. There's nothing wrong with bagged ice, although again, I would look for cubes that are kind of this size. You can also, I think, like Tesco's, a couple other places do, some ice cubes that are about the size of eggs. So they're really good for the gin tonic as well. So if you're doing a lot of these gin tonica big style glasses, the best bet is to just buy some ice in that situation. Right, what else? We got some questions here. Just looking back, some questions of are tins of pre-made gin tonic acceptable on a train journey? Yes, they are. The thing to understand with a pre-mixed gin tonic is it's not a fresh gin tonic. It's a different beast altogether, but it does serve a purpose. Some are much better than others. I think there's some Tanqueray ones that you can get. I think they're really good, particularly the Flor de Sevilla. Sipsmith one's pretty good, as is the Bombay Sapphire one. They're a few worth checking out and making sure that they're nice and cold. We did, I actually found a picture of it today when I was preparing for this, do a tasting of gin and tonic tins on a train just to see what they were like. And those were the ones that had came up particularly well from our tasting. So I think it's absolutely fine to do that. But ideally, it's got to be cold. You've got to get it from that fridge in an ideal world. Right. Oh, and of course, one of the other options when you have a gin tonic is you can possibly go for a no ice answer, which I will demonstrate now. Now, no ice takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of prep work beforehand. So this is one that was prepared earlier. So this is a very small glass with some gin in it. You can see it. It's been in the freezer. It's wafting of chill as we go by. One of my chilled tonics here. So, and this is very much in the kind of style of the old Gin Fizz. Gin Fizz is a mix of gin, sugar, lemon juice with sparkling water. But so is the Gin Collins. But the difference is the Gin Collins doesn't have ice and Gin Collins does have ice, is in a larger glass and is designed to be sipped more slowly, whereas this is designed to be drunk a little bit more quickly. So you can also do that. That's exceptionally cold. There's no dilution at all. Obviously, you've got to have a very nice chilled tonic, which we will come on to right now. So you can keep your tonic at ambient room temperature, or you can keep it in the fridge. If you put it in the freezer, it will freeze. So that's not a great option. The big difference between the two of these, and this is possibly the one top tip that I will give you today. If you put the room temperature tonic tends to make sweeter, the gin and tonic that results is sweeter. The bubbles are bigger, but that also then means that it's less fizzy, and it tends to be a little bit more cloying. And it is particularly the case when you're using any sort of diet or slimline, which is perfectly fine to use those, but they suffer from being warm even more so. If it's from the fridge, it's crisper, it's colder, it's fizzier, smaller bubbles, it's drier. And the thing is, even if you put loads and loads and loads of ice with it, you can't compensate for that. So the one thing I would say is, if you want to make a really good gin tonic, put the tonic in the fridge. Make sure that it's nice and cold. You can also look at putting the gin in the fridge or even in the freezer if the ABV, the alcoholic strength, is high enough. As long as it's about 40%, I think you shouldn't have too much problem with the gin freezing. But be very careful if you've got anything that's got a stopper in the top, because then that might pop off. So you need to be wary about how you're storing your gin. Something like this little bottle I've got here is quite nice for storing a bit of gin in, because it'll stand upright in most freezers, and it can just be nice and cold. The other thing is, if you're worried about the gin freezing, is just don't fill it up to the top. So then when it freezes, it can expand and it won't break the glass. As someone who recently had a bottle break in their freezer, it is an absolute nightmare. So please learn from my mistake and be careful when doing something like that. Fridge is a nice kind of compromise for storing your gin, but it's a compromise, right? It's not as good as having it in the freezer, and it's still not as convenient as just having it in a cupboard somewhere. But it's similar to the tonic. If it's warmer, it tends to be a little bit sweeter. It tends to be less fizzy. You just don't get that real crispness. So it's kind of to get the real refreshing crispness of a gin tonic. It's the low temperature that you're really looking for. And potentially you can do it with glassware as well. Some people like to pre-chill their glasses, things like this, with ice beforehand, or maybe just add a load of ice, give it a bit of stir, pour off anything that's kind of that's melted in there, and then add some more ice. That's a nice way of getting it chilled. These little details, like chilling the glassware, just make the experience that little bit nicer. It makes the drink a little bit colder, and certainly if you've got friends around, or if you're treating yourself because you deserve a treat, that'll make things better for you. Now on to, we've got a question. Oh yes, garnishes. What kind of fruit would you put inside the cube that would fit well with a gin and tonic? Good question. Well, you could use lemon or lime or something like that. You could, if you wanted to, and I should demonstrate here so you can see, essentially this could work quite nicely, is you would take just a vegetable peeler like this, and you would just take a strip like this, and then you could, because this will fit in quite nicely actually, then you can just take your ball mold, and you can just pop that inside. And actually, because of how that kind of sits, it's going to be right on the edge. So as it starts to melt, then you're going to start to get the citrus in there. Actually, I just thought of that. Really like that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to have that tomorrow. So Luigi, thank you for that narration. But someone also talked about mint leaves. That would be fine. Pink peppercorns. Anything that will fit in there, I think would be great. I mean, in my one of the drinks has got little jellyfish in it. So, I mean, you could put those in there. Right, now talking a little bit about the method of the gin and tonic. So, it's easy, right? Gin and tonic. What's all the fuss about? But interestingly enough, doing some test, the order in which you put the ingredients in can make a difference, particularly if you don't stir. If you stir, it's a little bit different. But if you don't, that does make a difference. So I've tried all permutations of gin first, ice first, and tonic, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my bizarre findings. So my favourite, that's the one you want to know about. Gin, then ice, and then tonic. There were small, intense bubbles. Well, there's a nice balance, very chilled, very refreshing. So that's gin, then the ice, then the tonic. That's very good. And then also another quite, when I was testing it out, tonic and then the gin and then adding the ice, that seemed to work quite nicely. In the kind of middle ground is the classic of gin, tonic, and ice. I think that's how a lot of people make it, and that works quite well. But the fizz fades quite quickly, and I think those other two that I mentioned, the fizz stays around for a little bit longer. And the same with when you do ice and then gin and then tonic. The ones to avoid are adding the gin last. That's basically the takeaway, is don't add the gin last. And the reason why is that the gin tends to float a little bit on the top for a bit. And so the first sip that you take, it tastes way too strong. And then your last sip just tastes of tonic. And so, and it tends to be warmer, you lose the fizz, and it just seems a bit too boozy. I mean, I know it's boozy, it's alcoholic, but you want balance, you want nuance, you want savoir-faire. You don't want just a big hit of alcohol and then just a glass of tonic. Otherwise, you might as well just drink them separately. So just to recap, top ones were gin, then ice, then tonic, or tonic, then gin, then ice. But most importantly, don't put the gin in last. That's my top tip. River Tester Distillery, thank you for that. Excellent, great gin you make as well. So chuck out the fresh food to put the tonic in. If you saw our fridge, It's mostly full of alcohol or tonic as well. Mixers and vermouths and things like that. As I mentioned about this stirring aspect, there's a question as to whether or not you should stir or not. Now, for a long time, I was kind of the impression, no, like stirring, if you stir, you're going to take the fizz away. And you do to an extent. I was testing it earlier. I did 10 rotations and you saw everything fizz up. So you think, well, if the fizz is coming up then, that's effervescence that's not going to be in it later. But the stirring does help the ice to melt a little bit. And as I said, a bit of ice melt is good in a gin and tonic. And it does help to make it a little bit colder, but it does make it a little bit less fizzy. So there is definitely a balance between the two, whether you should stir or not. Again, it's up to you, but there's certainly a difference. We talked a little bit about the gin tonica, but I shall now demonstrate one of the things I learned when I went to Spain. Right, so I'm going to fill this glass up with ice. There we go. Yeah. Hold on. Let me just get this out of the way.
Thank you.
Can you hand me a bottle, please? Where's the little punch? Perfect. Right. So we have our glass full of ice. We'll get some gin. I think we will use this. Oh, well, I'm using this Mediterranean tonic, so we'll use this Sipsmith chili and lime. Chili, lime, savoury, go well with the herbal things. So that's about a double measure there. Right. Got that in our glass. We have our tonic. We have this little dooley. So we just do this. I've got to do it. There we go. You can, if I can just get the camera there, just so you see. See, there's a tiny little hole in there. And then this is where this might work and it might not. We have our gin. We have our tonic with a tiny little hole in it. And now, of course, you've taken all the fizz out of the tonic, but there is a theatre to it for sure. Giving it a little shake. This is called the jumping gin and tonic. Quite popular in Spain. I've got it everywhere. Right old mess. Good job to move that. When I was in Spain, the lady who was making me a gin and tonic didn't have the little punch, so she did it like this, which is with a big kitchen knife, and you can see how she's holding it there. A bit outrageous, but it was a very good drink, but a bit dangerous. So that's the glass, that's the ice. Now we come on to the garnish, the thing you're waiting for. So we talked a little bit about lemon and lime, and also this idea of like, why would you choose one from the other? I know, as I said, I like them both, but one of the things with lemon is it's got less sugar in it than lemon has got more sugar in it than lime does. So the lime tends to work quite well with slightly sweeter drinks, and that's why, at least initially, lime was really popular with some of the more contemporary American styles of gins, which tended to be a little bit sweeter. And the lemon was generally more popular with the very traditional Tanquerays, Gordons, these traditional, very dry kind of London dry kind of sort of gins. Now, obviously, things have changed a bit, and there's a whole range of different citrus fruits and different things that you can use. I've seen people use coffee beans, and I think that can work really well. I've seen black pepper, freshly cracked black pepper, particularly, I mean, something like this drink I just made, a little bit of freshly cracked black pepper would work really nicely on that. You'd have the aromatics as well. There's a lot of things that you can just have in your home that I think can work really well as part of the garnish. Someone was talking about mint leaves. Obviously, cucumber's been very popular with Hendrix, although, you know, that's been going back. People have been using that since the 70s. There's adverts for Seagram's gin where they're using cucumber and things like that. Pretty much anything that can go in there can do. I've had some with bell pepper. I think bell pepper is actually quite a nice flavour because you have that slightly crisp, slightly savoury freshness, which works quite well. Peas are another one I've seen used, and I have used myself. Just frozen peas instead of using ice. You put the peas in there, and that's another option for that. Right, I think that's 45 minutes. I think we're close. Was there anything left on my list? Oh, there is. So, does anyone have any questions? And then before that, I shall make a drink for our next speaker for next month, where we may well be back at the Wheat Sheaf, the Earl of Essex. He has his own gin and tonic, which I've made for him. So I prepare that. But whilst I'm doing that, if you have any questions, please send them over on the type now, please. Oh, can I have some more ice, please, sir? Great, thank you very much. Right, I'll leave that in a sec. Right, any questions from anyone? Right, so I've added a bit of adding some gin to this balloon glass. Here we go. And now something I'm going to do. Here we go. And this is another way of kind of changing your gins up a little bit. Is infusing them with tea. Now there are some tea bags. Or sort of botanical bags that are designed to go with particular gins. This is just an Earl Grey tea bag. There we go. I'm just going to put that in there and let that infuse a little bit. I think we need a little bit more gin in that, actually. Oh, no, I've done that. Luckily, he won't be drinking this because I've put my fingers in it. There we go. Bernadette, have you got any questions for me whilst I'm doing this? So I've got to wait for it to infuse for a little bit. So I'm hoping someone's going to ask a question. So as you see, it doesn't take very long because alcohol really extracts the flavors very, very quickly. So you've kind of gone to this sort of orangey brown sort of color. We'll take that out. We'll discard that down here.
Do you want questions?
Oh, has people got questions? Have you got some questions?
Timothy says, what's the best time of day to drink G&T? Hair of the dog, nightcap, or something in between?
Oh, good question. So the question was, when is the best time to drink a gin and tonic? That's an interesting one, and there's almost some thinking about like different flavors might work for different times of the day. So you could have, I mean, it's a fantastic pre-dinner drink. I just think it works really, really nicely. But that might be something where you want something a little bit like more cooling, something like this, something that's a bit larger. And then maybe like as a nightcap, you might want to have something, you might want to use an aged gin or something like that, or maybe something that's a little bit shorter. Maybe use a mix of tonic and soda water or something like that. Possibly, if you want a little nightcap, you could have your gin and your tonic and maybe just put a little splash of ruby port or something like that in there. I think that could work very nicely as well. As for the hair of the dog, it's possible. There's the breakfast gin from Few, which works quite nicely for breakfast. Works very well with kippers, funnily enough. For that, though, I wasn't doing it as a gin tonic, but you could. I did that with, it was the gin, a little spoonful of marmalade, shredded, of course, and then just top that up with sparkling water. So it's similar, but you could use tonic if you wanted to use tonic for that. I mean, this is going to have a slight breakfasty feel because you've got the Earl Grey tea in there. There's the bergamot in there. That's infused. That's all nice and cold. We will some of this Mediterranean there. I think that would go well with the orange kind of flavors that we've got going on. So I'm just adding that in. Always, the less fizz you get when you're pouring it, the more fizz it's going to be when you're drinking it. And then I've got an orange, and we're just going to do very, very simple. Just I'm going to do this. I'm peeling it over the glass. It's not very easy for me to do it, and for you to see it. But the idea is that when you're peeling it over the glass, all these oils are coming out of the peel. So they add some flavor. That's why you sometimes see people kind of whacking the glass. It's to kind of get the oil around for the aroma. Anyway, we'll pop that in there or somehow. There we go. So it's nice and orange. This is the Earl of Essex Cheers to the Earl of Essex. There you go. Thank you. Any more questions, Aaron? Coming through? Mine got delayed. Has anyone got any more questions? If not, then I shall bid you farewell and say thank you very much for listening. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Oh, well, yes, Veronica, thank you very much to Sarah. She's done a great job helping me with everything. Particularly with the technical difficulties, keeping me sane. So, right, well, if that's it, don't forget, send in your picture of your gin tonic that you've been drinking to @Summer Fruit Cup on the Twitter or the Instagram for your prize. Thank you, Ali, and I will speak to you all later. Bye-bye.